interject because, and I'm speaking from a female point of view, right? There's a level of vulnerability that when you're in a relationship that you want from your partner, right? There's that level. I think, I don't know if I'm coming from a generation or a time that's different from now when it comes to young women, but like, I think when you're interested in somebody, and I'm speaking of hetero relationships, you know, when you're speaking to a male and you're talking to someone, right, you want that male to have a backbone too. And you don't want him to be so soft, right? Like there's a level of, you know, there's that fine balance.
Right.
There's a balance. It's a balancing act. And it depends on how intimate and how deep your relationship becomes, where you see that vulnerability and a female is not willing to play on that. There has to be a level of trust there built. So I can see how young Black men are not really, from an ego point of view, ready to just be so vulnerable because they don't know how their vulnerabilities will be taken by women. Right. And that's my perspective, because I hear from young men and they're like, yeah, well, I got dumped because she says I'm too nice, or, you know, there's that level. And it's like, young men have to figure that out. Like, yeah, I can't be too nice and just be like, you know, somebody's doormat, but I also have to know, you know, when to open, when not to open up, when to share, when not to share, when to be able to shed a tear. I mean, when President Barack Obama shed a tear during those, the funeral conversation he had over, I don't remember which shooting, there were so many. Remember? And he shed a tear on national television. Yeah, and it was like, wow, like this man, he is into his woman. I mean, that was like a really iconic moment, right? Like you saw this strong Black man who is the commander in chief, right? And able to show his humanistic side of, I'm a father. Those were someone's kids. Right, to be able to own that. But you know, I can see from a relationship point of view, yes, you know, and when you're dealing with like relationships, when both the Brother Anthony's are speaking, you know, you're both touching on something that's really real, is that, you know, we do have to get to our youth, but I feel like young women also have a hand in that, because you could end up with a really, say Brother Anthony's talking to some 13-year-old young men, right? Young boys. And you're telling them to be nice, to be upstanding, to be polite, to be this, to be that. And, you know, their circle of friends are also speaking that same language. But then you find a little fly honey coming around and she's not in that same mindset. Right. And she's got his attention, and then it's his first little girlfriend experience and she breaks him. Right. That male ego has been broken. It's so fragile. And he's going to be like, Brother Anthony, you sold me a fraud. My heartbreak is real. I'm never going to be vulnerable again. Right. My ego is broken.
Right. That's what you say and then what you experience. Right. And so you can teach somebody one thing, but if they have a bad experience, how will that experience now shape how they move forward? How will they be able to move in a way where who they are on the inside is able to resolve what happened to them, right? The trauma, right? Because there's what you know about yourself, and then what happens to you in a situation and what you did or you didn't do, and how you attempt to resolve, how will I behave moving forward to either A, protect myself, or be more prepared for a response that might not be, you know, an affirmative. It may be in a rejection in some kind of way. And I bring that up to say that I think as men, we want to maintain a certain level of power over our lives. And I think that's every human being, but probably more so men want to feel more in control of what happens to them. And so as a response, a lot of times, and you know, I remember getting my heart broken, and I think a lot of times it becomes, well, now I'm not going to have feelings. Now I'm not going to share. I'm going to play this more to the vest, and I'm going to listen for you, what you have to say. You tell me how you feel. I'm not letting you know how I feel. And you become a little bit of an emotional soldier, right? And when I say emotional soldier, I mean, you got all kinds of emotions going on the inside. From the outside, it's like, I got to be tactical. I got to listen to what she says. But at the same time, what do I want to do? Where does she fit in? What do I want from her? Versus things just actually taking a natural course, but you still being able to maintain the authority of who you are. Like, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
First, I want to give an example, man. This might be a corny example, but I like to use this example, man. Beauty and the Beast, man.
Okay.
If you notice in that movie, he was just this big, brotherly beast, right? And he was having a hard time softening up. He was having a hard time being vulnerable about his feelings, being romantic, being in touch with his, his caring side, and all the little characters like, no, man, you got to do this, you got to start. And then and when he felt a little sign of rejection, what'd he do? I don't know if y'all seen the movie, right?
Yeah.
He got angry.
I don't know what happened, but yeah.
He was slamming doors. He was angry because he felt like she wasn't coming down to a dinner that he set up. It just made him so angry because he felt so rejected. And it took a whole process for him to finally start softening up a little bit, because he's just a big beast. And that's how I feel a lot of our men are. We have so much insecurities, so much self-esteem issues, things that we're not ready to talk about. You might think we're mad at you, but really we're just insecure about some stuff, and that's just how we're moving. But that's exactly how I see a lot of our men, our Black men in particular, is that beast. We are beasts with shoulders and all this and that, but we just do not know exactly the process of how to soften up and be vulnerable. And when we do feel a sign of rejection, or we have been scarred before or heartbroken before, we turn into these beasts or emotional soldiers, like you say. That's exactly what we turn into. And that's where I see a lot of beasts walking around who have it inside of them. They just don't know quite how to really reach down there and pull it out. And that's how I see a lot of our men.
Yeah, I really like that Beauty and the Beast thing is good, man. Like I remember as a youngster, it was a girl in my neighborhood I liked. She was like, nah, you know what I mean? I was actually upset to the point of tears, you know what I mean? And my uncle, fortunately, I got, them cool old school uncles that Spice Adams be talking about. I got like 4 of them, you know what I mean? So I was fortunate enough to, even in their, some of their ideas were messed up, but it was some of the knowledge they just dropped. My Uncle Butch, I'm just gonna call him my Uncle Butch. That's what we call him.
Right.
He just told me, man, straight up. He said, man, you think that's gonna be the only girl that's gonna say no to you, man? He said, hey man, you brush yourself off and you just move on to the next, man. Like they gonna say no, and the answer's not gonna be yes. That was kind of put in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But being in a relationship that and after high school, that really messed me up, where you talked about your emotions are guarded, man. And if I want to have to bring this up to the homies, we came up with this term called love is evil spelled backwards. Think about it for a second. We used to be like, love is evil spelled backwards. You know what I mean? And we was out there being reckless, man. And I think, those different experiences, man, like even if you don't know how to deal with your emotions, most men, they probably won't admit it. They'd be like, man, this in their mind, when they're by themselves, they like, man, this ain't me. This ain't me. To be out here just wilding out. This just ain't me. And 9 times out of 10, man, what's crazy is it might be a sister that you just cool with that'll say, this ain't you, man. Or even your boy, like, yo, man, like, it's that one person, man. Like, I got my uncles. Sometimes I have my boys. You need that one person that keep you accountable. Like, yo, this ain't you, to get you to kind of pump the brakes. You know what I mean?
Right.
It just feels like there's just this era, man, this group, just this generation, man, where, like you said, they're kind of going unchecked. And if you build rapport with a lot of young cats, they'll come to you with some stuff, and then you can be that uncle. You know what I mean? And
so we need more uncles. We need more uncles and aunties, right? More uncles and aunties to give that good counsel.
I shared more with my uncles as a kid than I did with my dad. The older I got, I would share more with my dad, because I knew my uncles, they was just out there. Like I said, I got 4 uncles like Spice Adams, man. And
some of it was good advice and some of it wasn't no good.
Like, but you knew it, even as a kid, like, nah, I ain't gonna do that.
I ain't gonna do that.
That don't even sound right. But It's like an old sage, man. You got that old sage, man. It's kind of, yo, look here, youngin. You know, I've been where you at.
So to kind of frame this again, right? Reframe it back into the context of the Malcolm and Marie, and then the Judas and the Black Messiah, understanding that our roles as Black men in the community, that we have a responsibility to our women and we have a responsibility to our community. And then there is the push-pull of, you know, the authority construct being one more patriarchal or one matriarchal. And how do we reconcile leadership, right? Is the leadership that we're looking to attain for ourselves and the leadership that we're proceed to follow, right? Is that leadership one where we can attach to ourselves the authority to say that as a Black man, I can follow where our women are trying to take us? And then at the same time, as a Black man, if I disagree with where our women are taking us, now, do I call them out their names? Do I become an antagonist? Do I, you know, try to thwart anything that they would attempt to do because they're not listening to my perspective as a Black man? And I bring this up to say that there are some of these dynamics that are taking place in the different spaces of politics and then the social politics. You know, how are we preparing our Black men to still be distinctly men in terms of how they see themselves, and assuming that they identify, right, as men, and understanding that there's a variety of different ways to identify, and with respect to that, still being able from their perspective to be able to either lead or follow, knowing that there can be a shift from patriarchal to matriarchal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
and maybe what we're looking at is not so much gender focus, and maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But what I'm ultimately trying to arrive at, you know, and asking you guys is that these are constructs that have been are constructs within our society that as human beings that happen to be of a male orientation, and however we might identify, right, in that spectrum of what masculinity could be, how does that person find themselves in that space? How do they find and discover who they are in that space and then have a voice, is what I'm trying.
I think, first of all, we have to make it okay or make it seem comfortable to identify your weaknesses. Like, we got to tell our young men, it's okay, sit down and write your weaknesses. Be real about your weaknesses. Be humble. A lot of it starts with just being humble. To be honest with you, we got to start telling them how to be humble, how to be encouraging to yourself, and identify your weaknesses and be real with your weaknesses. And then from there, you can save so much time and trouble if you just be real with your weaknesses and let somebody else help you with that. I think that will solve so much if we just be real and be more comfortable with ourselves about our weaknesses. I think that would save us a lot of trouble right there.
And you know, I also challenge young people to find women that they respect through history or just in their family. Like, yo, your auntie is somebody you can go to. Tell me about your auntie. Explain to us why you respect her so much. Or school a youngster about, like, you know, we talk about the Black Panther Party, man, but we don't talk enough about how integral women were to that whole movement, man. Sisters were the backbone of the movement.
It's funny you say that too. Like, so the Black Panther Party, the Civil Rights Movement, the bus boycott. Think about how instrumental Black women were to the bus boycott, right? Like, it ain't going down without them.
Even with
they weren't always the lead. You didn't see their face all the time. They wasn't always at the forefront, but they did have a critical role in each era, each story, each situation. They all had a very, very critical role. Fred Hampton, MLK, all of them had a woman that was really kind of guiding them behind the scenes. Everybody, from Malcolm to Barack Obama, they all had a woman that was guiding them behind the scenes. They just wasn't the forefront.
Right.
And then, you know, even in the Black Panther movie, the actual comic character, one of the things I like to point out to young people is when the Black Panther caught up with Claw, right? He was about to kill that man. it was a woman that stopped him, and she stopped him by saying, "My king, the world is watching."
That's a great point.
She still recognized his place, but she cautioned him like, "Hey, can't do this here right now." You know what I mean? Like, I'm stopping you because I support you.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And that's a scene that a lot of people miss, man.
Yeah.
He's about to get loose, but she was like, "My king." She didn't say, "Stop, what's wrong with you?" She didn't do that. "My king, the world is watching." So you can still be a king, and then, you know, still let your queen kind of get you to chill. You know what I'm saying? It's cool. The most powerful piece on the board is the queen, man.
Come on now.
I think if we could break
I'm so
down.
glad you said that, Anthony, because the game of chess is relative to life. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I had
but
to
I'm
interrupt
just
you.
saying the queen she can move in every direction. You know what I mean? So you don't have to. You still the king. The game ends if you go, but hey man, your queen, she's making all these moves for your benefit. You can only move as a king one space at a time, because you got the law out here that's gonna be hyper aggressive with you. You got different policies that are in place that could probably put you away for years and years. But now you got your sisters out here getting more education, getting into these different places, whether it be in Congress, your state legislatures, CEOs of different companies and stuff like that. They're making the moves for your protection.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you can win the game. We can't win the game without sisters. And I think
the other thing, Anthony, I think this is the point that I'm receiving from you, is that matriarchal or patriarchal, we move as one body.
We're moving as one body. And if
whether you're married or not, whether we're married in a committed relationship or not, we are one body. When it comes to being a community of Black people, of people who belong to the African diaspora, we move as one body. Regardless of what you think you're doing as an individual, it all comes back to one body. You know what I mean?
Because you know what? Let's go back to the crime bill. Like, our people wanted that crime bill. It threw a lot of brothers in prison. It threw a lot of sisters in prison too.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I'm saying? So it's everything in my mind. Like, it's even as a man, like, I knew when my wife said she wanted to get her PhD, right? And like I said earlier, how could I not benefit from that? You know what I mean? Be it the change of income or just the connections that she makes, and, you know, the ability to get in front of people that I might not have been able to get in front of, right? And then vice versa. You know what I mean? I make my connections. I'm always going to big up my wife. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the way. And just that stigma of being married. Like, you got people scared to say they married, man. Like, yo, just like, what you do it for? But it's that's always been my mindset. Like, Brother Farrakhan, Minister Farrakhan said a long time ago, I ain't all right if we ain't all right.
But you know, it's interesting. There is a African proverb that is, I am because we are because I am.
And many hands make light work.
And two people. But
Ubuntu. I forget.
Ubuntu.
Yeah,
There we
Ubuntu.
go. Yeah. And it's so real, because you think about it, you can have a bunch of successful Black CEOs, men and women, but they can only go as far as the community rises, right? So to that extent, they don't have the leverage that their finances might profess that they have, because they ain't got the people behind them. Not the people that have access to be behind them in the ways that they need people to be behind them. Right. You follow what I'm saying? So to a large extent, whether we're breaking this down as one-to-one, a Black man to a Black woman, and they don't know each other, that they're not married, they are still in the same ecosystem and need each other and have impact on each other no matter where you go.
No matter where you go.
Just because we're Black.
So when we lift I want to jump in. So like, when we lift each other up, this is what the fear factor comes from with the other. So we live in two different societies, right? We have white America and all of the Eurocentric infrastructure that we have to learn to maneuver to become successful in our own right, in whether it be our relationships, financially, whatnot, all of those things. But then when we start to think about the collective, what you just said, you know, we are because, say it again. I am because we are. Yes. So when we do that, we're looking from a collective point of view. We're not looking for just me, myself, and I, which goes completely against individualism, right? Which is what we're in. We're in the Americas, right? And this is how we are structured. When we lose toilet paper at the site of the pandemic, right? That just shows you what type of society we're living in, right? I mean, at the bare bones of our basic needs. And I would say that, you know, as a society, we need to unify, because the divide and conquer has been like, it's been winning for too long. So when you look at when you just look at Black culture or the diaspora, or you look at the entire people as a group of people, we all know it's not a monolith. We all know everybody has their own personal experiences, but we throw shade, or we put shame on people who have maybe biracial relationships, or, you know, we outcast, or because someone's more well off economically and someone isn't, or I'm living in the burbs and you're living in the ghetto. Right. You know, oh, you have people in prison and I don't. You know, we have these like, we've created more divisions within our own people because of what has been created, in lack of better terms. It's been created and we've been feeding into it. So my point is that when you look at the Black Panther Party and you look at democratic politics today, and that fear factor of the very extreme left, oh my God, all of America could get a free, for example, college education, a 2-year community college education. You feel people going berserk over that argument, for example, because why? I mean, everything Anthony has just said about education and supporting his woman through PhD level and all of the education that he's acquiring right now. Like, what's wrong with getting more education? If you get that baseline of just community college done, maybe that opens the gateway for more education, right? Yeah. So, you know, it's the economic element of our society. So my thinking is when you look at the Black Panther movement, that was one of their asks. And so you can see, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the panic is the best way I can explain it. There's a sense of panic. You talk about urgency, but this is a sense of panic amongst the people who are on the very far right.
Right. Is that if they acquire the education, because remember, at one point in time, we didn't want them to learn to read. But imagine these people with an education and what they could do as a community if the standard was just, the standard across the Black community was a college education, that being the standard, right? Imagine what would happen in terms of leadership positions in this country. And then the question, I think, to, you know, the white power structure is, where do we fit into that, right? And that's what I think I can see where the concerns are. And particularly a white patriarchal power structure is threatened by seeing something like that take place.